we added all that automated generation of descriptions and chapters and everything. And then we eventually even added viral moments, which is detecting the top 10 moments in the episode that would make interesting social clips. So right now we make it, for example, you can just click generate viral moments. It'll give you the top 10 moments. It'll generate the copy for LinkedIn and X and Instagram and YouTube Shorts, all that copy that goes with it. And we just launched, and we're doing an improved version next week, but we actually launched a clipping feature. It'll generate all the clips for you. And the next step is going to be integrating with the social media platforms. So it's pretty amazing from a production point of view.
Yeah, I love that. And you're basically bundling all this, all these podcasting tools that podcasters need into one, right? Which is kind of this end to end. What about the recording? We're recording on Riverside, of course, right now. Do you see yourself vertically integrating into that in the future? Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Ignite podcast. Today, we're delighted to have Edward Brawer on the program. He's the CEO and founder of PodcastAI. You know, he's had a long history in technology and entrepreneurship. He's also, PodcastAI is also a portfolio company for Team Ignite, fair disclosure. Ed, welcome to the program.
Hey, pleasure being here.
Would love to get an intro from you for the audience.
Hey, I'm Ed. I'm the CEO of PodcastAI. PodcastAI is a podcast automation platform. And what we do is we automate podcasting. End to end is the ambition, but right now we do a whole bunch. And we're going to end up actually having full automation of all podcasting.
Yeah, it's a really slick platform. I remember getting the demo and thinking, every podcaster needs this. You know, to the ability to upload your episode, automatically edit it, get the chapters, get the summary, the description, the titles, just everything about it. What's the genesis of that? Like, how did you get this idea?
Yeah, so my co-founder Sean and I, we had been doing a YouTube/Patreon, creator economy platform previously. I've been a co-host on a podcast for over a decade. So we just really love the format. And part of what we were doing with the previous company was, what's going to compete with YouTube. And it kind of turns out that the answer is actually just good old podcasting, which is kind of interesting because it's this old format or standard from 2005, but it really does seem to be the answer. And we kind of see everything converging on it. How we got into this is kind of interesting. About a year ago, I started testing some AI tools, some new models, and everything's really open source in AI. Like even the vertical like API companies, they're really just, layering on top of open source projects. Everything's pretty accessible. But I was playing around with some of the text to speech tools, and I realized I could do the voices of the all-in hosts. So I was playing around with that. That was kind of entertaining. And then I realized, hey, I could actually do an entire parody episode. So I did a 10-minute episode parody of All In. I called it the AI podcast. or what was it? AI All In, something like that. And I tweeted the first episode. It actually went viral. Jason retweeted it. The All In account retweeted it. And I ended up doing 6 of those episodes. And at the time, I saw Presh, who's one of the leads on Jason Calacanis's Founder University, which is his on-ramp to his Accelerator. He was saying the 5th cohort was open. And so Sean and I, my co-founder, we applied as PodcastAI. We had found podcastai.com. And that was one of those things.
Was that domain like just open and available?
No, it was for sale.
Wow.
It was $10,000.
Yeah.
And before that, if anybody had asked me, would you ever pay $10,000 for a domain? I would have said, no, you're kidding. But when we saw that domain name, we just looked at each other. We're like, buy it.
Yeah.
That was like a flash second. Exactly. That was a no-brainer. So we applied as PodcastAI, and sort of the original genesis or ambition was being able to create an entire synthetic episode, sort of as like those AI all-in episodes where people were asking, like, how are you doing this? Do you have a GitHub repo? Is this real? And so our idea was like, yeah, we can make it real. And then, if the mission was, okay, let's get an LLM training on past transcripts and to be able to produce new content based on a docket, but also being able to output in speech, like actually putting out speech as if it was those LLMs, if they were actually the AI hosts. The precursor to that we realized was a SaaS platform to just automate podcasting. So because the precursor to training an AI host was transcripts, we made it so you can upload your episodes and have the transcripts. Then we realized, okay, let's make it so you can chat with an AI version of a host.
Yeah.
So we made it so you have the website automatically for your show. And so we have all the transcripts on, we have, the chat with the AI. But then we realized, okay, we can actually build out a SaaS platform around this. We added feed hosting, we added, all that automated generation of descriptions and chapters and everything. And then we eventually even added viral moments, which is detecting the top 10 moments in the episode that would make interesting social clips.
Mm-hmm.
So right now we make it, for example, you can just click generate viral moments. It'll give you the top 10 moments. It'll generate the copy for LinkedIn and X and Instagram and YouTube Shorts, all that copy that goes with it. And we just launched, and we're doing an improved version next week, but we actually launched a clipping feature. It'll generate all the clips for you.
Yeah.
And the next step is going to be integrating this with the social media platforms. So pretty amazing from a production point of view.
Yeah, I love that. And you're basically bundling all this, all these podcasting tools that podcasters need into one, right? Which is kind of this end to end. What about the recording? We're recording on Riverside, of course, right now. Do you see yourself vertically integrating into that in the future? Or is that kind of, hey, that's just a whole nother kind of business?
No, we see it as sort of part of the same thing. So if you kind of take a spectrum, there's pre-production, that's like guest research. Then there's production, which is recording and editing.
Yep.
Post-production is what we have right now, which is generating all the metadata that goes on top of your episode and putting it out. That's distribution. We do that. The website automatically generating. We do that. Then there's promotion. That's the clips and posting to social media platforms. We do that. So we have, the post-production onwards. We have that covered right now.
Yeah.
And we're going to backfill to the pre-production, production and pre-production.
That's
it's
fascinating.
Just a natural part.
Do you see yourself sort of kind of becoming the next gen kind of Anchor, AI powered Anchor FM kind of platform where you're also doing the hosting and the RSS feeds, and you can distribute now your podcast to other places, even YouTube, right? Does YouTube allow you to insert podcasts and videos externally? You always have to use Studio for that.
Yeah, so they do have an API, and that's something we have in the works. We should have it out, within a month. But we're going to have push to YouTube. Yeah. So that means that you drop your episode in one place, PodcastAI. It goes out to Apple, Spotify, the tail end of all the hosting, all the consumption platforms, and it'll go out to YouTube as well. And on top of that, your social media posts that'll be automatically generated along with the clips, those will automatically schedule out to all your social media platforms. So it's really going to be total management of distribution and publishing. So we're already way past there on Anchor. That's table stakes. And then when we backfill to the production, meaning the recording and the editing and the pre-production, guest research, that's really going to fill out that entire thing so that, right now, podcasters, they're stringing together like half a dozen tools.
Yeah, I'm using probably 6 different tools right now. I got Riverside to record. I'm using, my editor uses Premiere Pro. I was just using Riverside. And then we have Opus for our clips, right? Yep. And then we have Spotify and Anchor for the RSS stuff. And then YouTube on the video side. And then, ChatGPT for guest research or Perplexity, writing those outlines, researching what should I ask this person about. And then a lot of the post-production too, the social media posts, the blog posts, all that stuff. So yeah, putting, I think, all those point solutions into an end-to-end platform where it's everything you need from end to end for your podcast.
Exactly. So yeah, that's going to be pretty amazing. We also just did a very talented iOS developer. So we actually did 2 hires just recently. So our CTO, Greg Perkins, he is focused on all those integrations I just mentioned and getting that going, which is super important. Push to YouTube, I think, is going to be really big for us.
Yeah.
And then we have Sean Allen, who's coming on in order to actually do a podcast client, which is going to be super interesting. And the mission there is actually completely changing the interface for podcast consumption, whereby you will be able to, just through audio, say, okay, give me the latest episode of Rogan, or it'll be able to say, hey, do you want to listen to this next? You say yes, no.
Wow, so you're even going to vertically integrate down to the listening layer.
Yeah, because so there, the company, we're going to have like this 1-2 punch, which is we're going to have the SaaS podcasting platform for all the podcasters to build out and just be the backbone of their shows. And that's going amazingly well. But because we have those transcripts, because we have the voices for the hosts, and because we can even, for example, take a 3D scan of a host and actually have a 3D model of the host, what's going to be possible on the consumption side is going to be pretty insane, right? You're going to be able to put on an Apple Vision Pro and, for example, be at the table with the all-in guys.
Wow.
And you're going to be able to talk back and forth to them, right? So it'll sort of be like the Star Trek holodeck. So
you'll basically take
vision.
the 2D video recording that they're recording and take a model of them, and you could actually just be sitting in the room while they're recording while they're doing the podcast virtually.
Yeah, it's basically just building a video game essentially.
Yeah.
But we don't even need to base ourselves on the 2D. It's just with the transcripts, we have the timestamp of every single word, and every word can be turned into a phoneme and a viceme, which is how your mouth moves. We can use an LLM to infer how the person would be moving, gesticulating, based on what they're saying. We can use an LLM to determine based on context who they should be looking at, and we can essentially recreate, like in a Star Trek holodeck type thing, we can recreate that entire scene. And we can do what we do right now with the AI chat on the website. We can do voice to voice. So you can say, hey, wait a minute, guys, you said this last week. They'll turn towards you and go back and forth. And then you can tell them to carry on and resume the episode. So we're going to be in a position where we're not only the first to deliver that experience, we're going to have it so that all of our podcasters can flip a switch to enable that experience. And that's going to be huge.
Yeah, I love that. What a cool vision. The Star Trek holodeck, right? I'm such a Trekkie. I grew up, I think I have the Enterprise right over my head, actually. That's the NCC 1701D.
Nice.
It's really small. I need to get a bigger one, but yeah, I'm such a nerd around that stuff. But that's interesting. So, like, what else is in the vision? This 5 or 10 year vision? You're already, talking about some really incredible things. But where do you think this whole platform goes?
Yeah, so we're a year old in terms of the company.
That's incredible how fast you guys have moved, and that's why I'm so bullish now as an early stage investor. Is I run into young startups like you guys that are just executing, building, shipping fast, and I've been actually really impressed over the last. I think I met you guys in like October, maybe it was like launch 24-ish. I was on the the VC panel where you kind of come in and you give your 3-minute spiel. I was like, okay, this is interesting. I'm gonna go meet these guys, and then it's been 6 months, and you guys have just been executing.
Yeah, 100%. It's the vision is pretty, like, it's pretty ambitious, but it was important for us to have that SaaS platform growth just as like sort of a space block, if you will. And so it's important financially. First of all, it means we have traction, we have revenue, we have growth, but it also. So here's the funny thing. So when you're talking to investors, they always ask, like, what's your moat? And it's kind of a funny question sometimes. It's like a real moat is actually kind of rare.
Yeah, there are no moats anymore, unless you're like in a marketplace business or network effect business or some sort of platform of record. I mean, your moat is the platform of record. It becomes like the data repository for podcasts, right?
Yeah,
I don't know. That's just how I run my business. It's how my podcast generates the website. That's how I generate my episodes. That's the moat right there.
There's no real IP-based moats. That's not really a thing.
And it's not really a thing anymore generally, unless you're like OpenAI or something, or Snowflake. It's just really, and even they are getting whittled
even
away.
then, okay, so let's take OpenAI. So ChatGPT, everybody, when they talk about a chat interface to an LLM, what do they think of ChatGPT? What is OpenAI's moat? Well, ChatGPT, frankly, is a weekend project at this point, right? So what is the moat? The moat is the fact that they are the first to have a good implementation of it. That's it, right? So that's how, and what's the moat for YouTube? YouTube's not a weekend project, but it's not more than a month-long project if you wanted to have a sort of mini video platform. I should know. So, what's the moat? It's, well, the network effects and the brand value and all that stuff. So true moats are really, really hard, and really execution and distribution. That's what gives you a moat. Brand, that's what gives you a moat.
Yeah, just executing is the moat.
Exactly.
Yeah, just moving faster. Can somebody else build podcast AI? Yeah, easily.
Yeah.
Like, can you guys execute faster and get to the scale faster? That's really what it boils down to.
Exactly. And look, there's some platforms like you mentioned, Opus Clips. Like, yeah, they're really vertically focused on clipping in general for all kinds of video. Basically spitting content, right? Any sort of video, turn it into clips. That's a feature for us, right? So that's just a feature in Podcast AI,
right?
And we're gonna take it to 90% of what Opus Clips does, which is what 90% of people need, or 99% of what people need if they're podcasters.
Right.
So being able to deliver all of those features and functionalities within one platform, that's what makes it like this really great proposition for podcasters. And then, we get the vision for the podcasting SaaS platform, that's like our target is to hit, 100 mil in ARR within 5 years. So that's super ambitious right there. But the interesting thing for us is that consumer app vision for consuming podcasts, and we're booting that up right now. In parallel to doing this, that's interesting to us because there actually is a path to an interesting moat, which is, for example, we just signed on the number 2 medical podcast. We're signing on podcast networks, big agencies that are doing like really top level podcasts that are in the top 200s and various niches. Having it so they can just flip a switch and give that experience, that's actually going to be one of those network effect type modes that are sort of unbeatable, I think. Right. So,
well, you make money 2 ways, right? Bundling and unbundling, right? And so you have all the unbundled, verticalized podcast applications out there, kind of that first gen of podcast stuff, you might call it. Now it's time for the Gen 2 rebundling of everything, and that's what I think you guys are timing it.
It's interesting. It's like you look at all the companies within the sphere of podcasting. So you have some companies that are really old, Libsyn, Buzzsprout, and you can tell sometimes like, hey, this thing looks like it's from 2007, and guess what? It's because it really is from 2007. And so they're pretty slow to sort of keep up with the new stuff coming out.
Yeah.
Then you have newer companies, Descript, they're transcript based editing. You have Riverside, which is great for recording, Opus, which is great for clipping. And they're doing really well, and they're sort of spreading horizontally. But I think we're just like fastest and have the most ambition in terms of really doing A to Z.
Yeah, I love that. What was the experience of going through launch like? So you got introduced to launch mainly because, Jason and team had retweeted your parody video. And that's how you kind of found out about launch. But tell us about the application process, getting in and kind of going through the cohort.
When I was doing those parody videos, Presh, who's Jason's person who heads Founder University along with Kelly, Presh had reached out and told me, hey, that was pretty amazing. And when he put out a call for applications for the 5th cohort of Founder University, I messaged him and, asked, hey, should I apply? And he told me like, let's go, right? Kind of saying, yes, apply. And the way Founder University works is they will take a $500 payment. You attend all of the sessions. And then once you've attended all the sessions, they will refund that $500. And the way they explain it is that was just to get attendance up to like 100%, and it basically worked, or near 100%.
Otherwise, a lot of people fall out and they're kind of like, oh, I'm not serious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you just need something to filter
like, I'm serious. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just to filter out who's serious. And it's funny, like, I'll sometimes get people reach out and ask, hey, is Founder U worth it? And it's such an easy question to answer. The answer is yes, it's obviously worth it because, and the full answer is, if you're not networked into Silicon Valley or have, warm intro capability, to get these warm intros to VCs, you basically have no access because there's so much low quality inbound that there has to be a filter for VCs.
Yeah, I deal with this now on a daily basis. I have so much low quality inbound. I try to look at everything. I try to respond to everything. But
it's really hard.
The more of a name Team Ignite and I myself develop, the more low quality inbound I get. Some are high quality. I have invested in plenty that came in cold, but yeah, it is a thing.
Yeah, there's this Mark Andreessen quote from a few years ago. It's funny. It took me a while to even understand it. like it's in plain English. I understood the words, but I didn't understand what he was saying. He was like, there's 4,000 venture qualified deals a year. We see 2,000 of those through our internal deal flow, and 200 of those get funded. 15 of those are successes, and 2 of them will make a portfolio. And if you're not tuned into VC land, you don't really understand what he's saying. He's saying venture qualified means you went through YC, you went through launch, you went through Techstar, or you're the ex head of whatever.
Deals. They're really fundable deals. Yeah.
Or you're the ex whatever from Facebook, or you have this big exit. Yeah, you'll get funded right away, right? But that's venture qualified. They won't look at you otherwise. And then 2,000 of those they look at through their internal deal flow. What does that mean? That means they will look at you if you got referred through SV Angels, which is their preferred angel partner. Mm-hmm. And SV Angels, you can't directly apply. You have to network yourself into SV Angels. So just unbelievably hard. And then the VC math, when you dial into that, 200 of those companies will get funded by the top tier VCs. 15 of them will be a success. 2 of them will be the unicorns that make a portfolio. Those numbers are probably higher now, possibly. It's
probably
from a few years
2x that now. Yeah.
Something like that.
16Z,
But you get the idea now how hard it is. Yeah, and I remember seeing another VC, I forget who, but he was sat down with some interviewer and he was asking these kind of naive questions like, if I do cold outreach and I send my deck, do you guys look at that? And the guy goes, yeah, cold outreach and decks, that's really important, as a function of understanding how popular our brand is. Mm-hmm. And basically what he was saying is they just use the volume metric as an interesting input for them, but they don't actually read the decks. At worst, at best nothing happens. At worst, they fund your competitor, you're somewhat successful, and they 2 years later have a snapshot into your internal thinking 2 years ago. That's all that did. Networked into Silicon Valley whatsoever. Founder U is an unbelievable opportunity because if you're applying to YC, you have a way less than 1% chance of getting in.
Yeah.
If you apply to Founder University, you don't have a huge chance of getting in, but you have a pretty good shot if you have a reasonable application. And what that means is you now have the opportunity throughout the program not only to consume all that great material that's teaching you, getting you going, and that huge community in Founder U, you actually get a shot to distinguish yourself and kind of prove yourself. And basically, Founder U, they'll take the top 10% of companies they try, and they'll do these little bookmark investments, 25K or 10K now they started experimenting with. So we got one of those 25K investments, and that's a little bookmark, which is your first step to venture qualifying yourself. Our journey was we applied, we incorporated in April, we applied in May, went through the program. I think in June, we got the 25K investment just based on our product velocity. We started getting our first customers in September. And then in September, we got invited to this dim sum dinner, like demo dinner. And that's another thing, right? The companies that distinguish themselves in Founder U, they get this opportunity, like they'll get invited to these dinners to demo and all this stuff, all this networking stuff. You're starting to venture qualify yourself. And after that demo went really well, then we got invited into the 30th cohort of the Launch Accelerator. Right. So the answer is after all that, the answer is yes, it's totally worth it, and the experience is amazing.
I love that. I love that journey from zero to Founder University, which is almost like an incubator, right? It's like we're a team with an idea. Cool, come in and we will help you work on that idea and build and get some traction. And then Launch kind of picks up where Founder University leaves off, which is like, okay, now we have something, and now we need to accelerate it. So walk us through. Go ahead.
Yeah, and to be clear, the top companies in Founder U will get invited into the Launch Accelerator. The top companies in Launch Accelerator will do great raises, and then it keeps going that way. So Launch is, with this round that we're closing right now, Launch will have triple down on us essentially.
Yeah, it's like three rounds of investment at that point, right? Because you get the 25K. And what's the dilution on the 25K?
Dilution on 25K, I believe it was a 1 mil val cap.
Okay. All right. So 2.5%.
Yeah.
And then you go through launch. And then
Yeah.
if you get accepted into launch, then it's like the standard YC deal. It's another like $125, $125 at a 7%.
Yeah, the launch accelerator was $100K for us. I think that's their standard deal still. I'm not sure. They might have updated it. And that was at a 1.67 mil val cap. And now they're doing our actual pre-seed round, a pretty big bet for them. And so,
right. So now they're going to invest from their fund and they're going to syndicate it.
Exactly.
And so for would-be founders out there listening, I mean, this path is doable. You know, go to Founder University with an idea, barely a company, and then go all the way through. And, you know, I'm kind of privileged at Team Ignite as a pre-seed seed investor. I get to kind of, you know, I go to pretty much every launch. I'm on the panel for every single launch at this point. I think I've done 5 at this point, 5 cohorts. And I always take the last date because I know towards the end of the accelerator, that's when the companies are most developed and I can really, really assess them. So I always tell Jackie, I'm like, give me the last date. So I know there's one coming up. And I get to see all this amazing work that you guys have been doing for months, if not years. Just pick the best ones. It's kind of a privileged role. But also, you know, admire what the launch team has been able to set up over there. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, and we had a pretty amazing cohort, but yeah, it was just an amazing experience with launch. You get all these introductions, you know, as many as you want, basically.
Yeah.
You have all that access. We even went down to visit Sequoia, which was pretty amazing.
I remember that.
Just an unbelievable opportunity.
Yeah, walk us through the experience of like what's the timeline and what do you do week by week, month by month, and launch?
Yeah, so with launch, you have I would say the backbone of the program is these weekly pitch meetings. So what they'll do is they'll train you to do a 3-minute super concise pitch. They keep it to 3 minutes. You really hone down, you develop a really great deck. It evolves over time, sort of as you're learning and getting feedback. But you're just getting so much batting practice in terms of pitching your company for 3 minutes that you get quite good at it, like amazingly good at it. And, you know, that's sort of the backbone. You have tons of, you know, content, you know, meetings, like they'll have an expert on UI, give a presentation on that. They'll have an expert on setting up your data room, give a presentation on that, on accounting, for, you know, all the stuff that startups need to get figured out in the early days. So they'll have content like that. And they'll also, you know, guide you through, shepherd you through, like, okay, are you meeting with VCs? Also, you know, what's your traction? What's your growth like? Just keeping track of all that. And like something I haven't mentioned maybe is just all the community you get through launch. Whether you're in Founder U or the Launch Accelerator, you have access to the Slack channel that just gives you access to, first of all, everybody that's starting, everybody that's been at it for a few years. So you have this huge, you know, diversity of companies at different points. And you just have all that access and really a community of people on top of your own cohort to sort of build with. So yeah, it's just that's a pretty amazing experience. And the actual Launch Accelerator program, it's something like 12 weeks. It goes on a little bit more. You have those weeklies, those pitches. There's a trip to Sequoia, which I mentioned, that's really fun. And you get to actually pitch them. It's sort of a pilgrimage. Obviously, Sequoia invests in very few companies. And also, you know, an accelerator, that's kind of early for them, right? They're more Series A. That's when they're really looking for stuff. But yeah, it's just this amazing experience. Like I can't like I can't be complimentary enough in terms of just like the goodwill that Launch just has with all the founders that go through it.
That's amazing. And so back to the PodcastAI tech stack. What kind of models are you guys using under the hood? What's your tech stack look like?
There's the regular tech stack, which is, okay, what's your back end? You know, Node.js, your database is Postgres, your front end is Nuxt, and, you know, stuff like that. So that's just the basics.
Yep.
But then there's the interesting stuff with AI, obviously, which is what models are you using? And like I'll just take a little divergence to sort of what people are looking at in terms of investment, because this is where it gets really interesting. So my sort of thesis on this is, with AI, there's going to be money made at the hardware level. So that's NVIDIA. Anybody can buy it right now.
Right.
And I think there's money going to be made at the application layer, which is what we're doing. We're orchestrating a whole bunch of models to do to build a platform and do something coherent and complicated.
Yep.
But then in the middle, there's these other two levels.
You're stuck in the middle.
There's these people doing these models, and the
problem
foundational
is models, right?
Yeah, the foundational models.
Yeah.
They're extremely expensive. They're constantly getting invalidated by each other, or out of date. And I think there very little is going to be made there. There's sort of a race to zero in terms of.
It becomes almost like a utility, right? It's like, great, you're PG&E exactly. And you deliver electricity.
Yeah, and the difference between the open source ones and let's say GPT-4, when GPT-4 came out, massive difference. The difference as we keep going on is going to become so small that it's just going to be irrelevant. So early on made a big difference. Difference between the models as we go forward, very small. And also, so many models are just based on open source anyways, it doesn't matter. And that kind of brings us, and there's going to be, few winners on models, sure, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of money made there. Then you get to the middleware layer, which is people providing API access to models, and they're building vertically something on top. So you have in text-to-speech, it turns out everybody is using something called Tortoise, TTS, text-to-speech. And that's an open source model. And then you have companies on top. You have 11 Labs, you have PlayHT, you have OpenAI now is doing text-to-speech. And with those companies, the problem is, I think, on the, with APIs, you're just having a race to nothing, a race to zero in terms of cost, to do these API calls. And there's no real moat, because really all we're talking about is an open source API, and you're an open source model, and then you're providing a nice API on top. Great. Even like if you look at the LLMs, everybody is just API compatible with the OpenAI SDK, and you can just change the endpoint. What that means is your code is the same, and you're just saying, okay, I want to talk to this one, I want to talk to Llama, I want to talk to OpenAI, I want to talk Claude or whatever, I want to talk to Grok. They're just interchangeable. So the middleware companies, I think that's not going to go very far in the long term. So that kind of brings me. We use these, right? But DeepGram, they're speech to text, they're transcription, and they're great. But okay, they're just evolved over Whisper. Whisper is an open source speech to text model done by Google, and everybody uses Whisper.
Right.
So is there long-term value in there? I mean, there's going to be a few winners, right? So these middleware API companies, Twilio is a thing, right? Twilio is a success, right? Somebody had to be a thing for sending out text messages. So it could very well be DeepGram is the Twilio of transcription, but there's not going to be a million of those.
Yeah, it's kind of like the way I liken it is like it's like a reverse pyramid. Right, way down at the bottom, there's one big winner, like NVIDIA, maybe AMD, right, or Intel, right? Like one or two big winners, and then the further up the stack you go, the more potential and opportunities you have to win. Yeah, and so you go up to the next layer. Yeah, there'll be like you said, 4 or 5 big companies doing foundational models, and then you go up another layer to the middle layer. Then you got a handful of platforms and all these different verticals, right? But then you go to the application layer, you have thousands and thousands of opportunities that are going to be unlocked over the next decade with this platform shift, right? Complete reimagining. And your company is a really great example of that, right? It's this complete rebundling using AI of all the workflows of running a podcast.
Well, it's funny. It's like the pejorative for these application layer companies maybe a year ago was, oh, these are wrappers. And you had some actual real wrappers, right? Like if you have a chat interface that's kind of like ChatGPT, okay, that's just a chat wrapper around an LLM, big deal, right? That's not a thing. Building a platform that's purpose-built for, let's say, some application, and you're structuring data, and you have all the state that you're managing, and you're having workflows, and you're building those out, and you're actually incorporating multiple models actually in the back end in terms of the tech stack. What do you have there? You're orchestrating a platform with multiple, and the user doesn't want to know what the models are. It doesn't care what the models are, right? What they want is for the thing to work and be like magic, right? I uploaded my video and I got my transcript and my chapters and I got my viral moments and I got my clips. It's like magic. But what are we using under the hood? Well, we just used a half dozen models there.
Right.
And the more technical version of this is with the chat-like interfaces. People are talking about, multimodal. What does that mean? It means you're talking to ChatGPT and you say, draw me an image. And what it's really doing is now it's not using its LLM. It's using its stable diffusion type thing that's actually drawing, right?
Right.
Again, everything is just based on an open source, right? Stable diffusion. It's interesting because, they're probably using their LLM to make a nice prompt to put into stable diffusion or whatever they're using behind DALL-E, right? So that's where it kind of gets interesting. But it's like, everything is going to be quote unquote multimodal because it's all about orchestrating all these models. Even if you talk about ChatGPT and GPT-4, GPT-4 is not one model. GPT-4 is a whole 16 different specialist models.
I didn't know that.
One of them is specially trained on medicine, let's say, and one is specially trained on law, and one is specially trained on, I don't know.
Oh, so they have a layer, they have a classification layer of what kind of conversation is this? And then we're going to route it to the proper kind of sub LLM.
Exactly. So they have a really lightweight model that is evaluating what the context is and deciding, okay, I'm going to sort this to this expert model or this one or this one or this one. Wow. Because they were hitting diminishing returns on one model being able to handle everything. So then they did these expert models, and then they have sort of like the Harry Potter sorting hat that picks what house you're in. So it's kind of like that. It's like, okay, it's the sorting hat.
Oh, you're talking about science or law or business or whatever the context.
Exactly.
And then
And then now you can kind of start understanding, like there was with Gemini, that whole thing where it was, where it was like being so politically correct, and it was like refusing to enter stuff, or it was giving like
Black George
everybody
Washington.
George Washington is African American, which is like, no, that we know for a fact not. but it was like everybody was African American. It was like kind of weird, right? And what they were actually doing, so it's kind of funny. People are like, oh, their models are doing this. It's like, actually, it's not their models. What's happening is you're saying, draw me George Washington, and they are then rewriting that prompt with that intermediate intercepting model to be, draw me George Washington and be inclusive and diverse and blah, 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 right? Yeah. And so they're rewriting your prompt, and then they're feeding it to their DALL-E model, or DALL-E equivalent or stable diffusion equivalent, and then that's giving out those results. So it should be easy to fix because it's actually happening on top of the model. It's just a prompt rewrite.
Wow.
So yeah, you kind of get the idea of how these are not just models anymore. There's tons around them.
I'm so glad I have my podcast, because in the future when AI does everything, at least I'll have something to do.
Yeah. Well, for now, I mean, our goal is to actually be able to automate content creation.
Yeah, that would be really smart. Like I could say, hey, generate a podcast of me interviewing this person about this. Like, Vinod Khosla just had his 12 things for the future. So like I could just record make a video of me talking about these 12 things from a early stage perspective. And it, if you train on hundreds of hours of me talking about stuff, it'll probably pretty convincingly sound just like stuff I would say and how I would say it.
So I was talking about this with a friend of mine, and he also an investor, by the way. And so I was describing, like, okay, we can have these AI hosts, like, they'll have an LLM trained on their transcripts, fine-tuned on the transcripts. It has the voice. It can have access to everything they've ever said in all the transcripts as memories, sort of, augmenting the LLM calls in terms of context. And that'll essentially be acting as the person, or be, a pretty close replica of the person, let's say.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, a beta simulation, you mean?" And I'm like, "What's a beta simulation?" And so he's big into sci-fi, and he was explaining there was this, this old sci-fi thing from like 50 years ago, maybe. And a beta simulation was something that's sort of trained or created based on everything you've ever put out. And so a beta simulation is like a 95 to 99% copy of you, but an alpha simulation is like a molecular level scan of your brain, maybe.
Right.
So these beta simulations, if you want to put it that way, they can probably get 99% there. So for example, if Steve Jobs never said what his favorite color was, we can't know what his favorite color was. But here's the funny thing. if the model knows what color all his cars were and what color all of his computers,
you can infer it
it
with
can
a high
infer
probability.
probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you
What,
can probably get pretty close.
So what is the upper echelon of podcasts? Top 100? Is there like a Billboard 40, top 40 for podcasts?
It's top 200. There's the top 200 on Apple, and there's the same thing on Spotify.
So if you think about the top 200, what's the over under, the 50-50 chance of what year will have a top 200 podcast that's completely AI generated? There's no human involvement. Well, there's human editor, but like it is an AI avatar, it's AI generated, AI scripting.
That's interesting as a category. So yeah, it kind of makes me wonder, like, will it ever be a separate category?
Yeah, where you always have like a human producer editor kind of reviewing everything.
I'm not sure. Like, I'll tell you right now, we actually prototyped. So we have a few things that are kind of interesting in this domain. So we have an ad read generator. So because we have your voice on your AI host in our system, and we have the context, what the show is, and we can basically say, okay, give us the name of your sponsor, give us the call to action, tell us who you want to read it, which host, and we'll generate an entire ad read. Let's say 2 minutes in the voice, completely ad-libbed.
Yeah, and so I have to sit there and read ads for my podcast. You just have the AI do it.
Yeah, we demoed that at Sequoia. That got us ranked number 1 by Roelof Botha, which was pretty cool.
Oh, nice.
And we also demoed it at The Pitch, which is sort of like a mini Shark Tank podcast that I was on in January, filmed in January, so the episode's probably going to come out. We demoed that, and then the people at Vox were actually interested in talking to us about using that for their ad tech. So some interesting things happening, in that domain. But so we're able to do that right now. And that's like a synthetic ad read. And the second synthetic thing we're doing right now is we started prototyping blog to podcast. So we found some people that are running blogs. They're pretty prodigious bloggers. Yeah. And we made it so, okay, every Monday, generate an episode based on the posts of the past 7 days. And it will have a totally ad-libbed intro, outro. It'll sort of not exactly read verbatim your blog posts. It'll kind of do it in a more natural way. I think of like
Ben Thompson doing something like this for his Stratechery, right? Because he has like 4 articles a week.
Yeah.
And then he has some past podcasts, but if he could just click a button and generate a podcast episode every week of all the articles from that week of Stratechery, I think he would do that. And he'd probably pay a lot of money for it.
Now. Yeah, we have that tech right now. It'll even do music on the intro and outro. It'll blend between the chapters. It's pretty amazing. And
that's amazing.
So we had one of our customers that was, doing the first prototype, and he was like, okay, what do I have to do now? And I'm like, nothing, just keep blogging, right? And this thing's on autopilot. So that category, we're going to be building it up essentially. But the ultimate vision of this is you have this autopilot podcast, and there's a docket. So right now, the docket for that thing is the blog posts. But the docket could be, okay, what's the latest news in tech for the past week? And then the AI hosts are actually going back and forth on that information, which is actually what a real podcast does. Like if you have a real podcast reviewing tech that week, well, what are they doing? They're reviewing the headlines, giving their opinion on it. So you can kind of imagine where this is going. And I think with what we're going to be doing with 3D in terms of reimagining those scenes for Vision Pro, where, well, you can imagine just rendering that, having an AI pass on top of it to make it photorealistic from just the 3D renders, and it's just the 3D like game style renders. And you're basically going to have totally synthetic content.
That's amazing. And this is all happening. So yeah, what is that over under where top 200 podcast, there is no human, it's all synthetic. There could be like humans involved with the production, obviously, but it's all AI synthetic.
I would say in less than 5 years.
Wow. All right. So by the end of the decade,
yeah,
we'll have fully synthetic top 200 podcasts and probably YouTube channels as well. For extension.
Sure. Well, it'll basically become anybody will be able to create this type of synthetic content. And so essentially provenance will become important. So for example,
by that? Yeah.
So provenance is going to become important because you're going to be able to deepfake anything. And so just the content is kind of meaningless. It's sort of like you're a Trekkie, so there's a lot of Star Trek fan fiction out there.
Yeah.
But that stuff is quote unquote not canon. What does it mean? It means, okay, it's great if you're looking for it, great, but nobody really pays that much attention to it because it's not official Star Trek. And in the same way, people are going to be able to make unlimited episodes of Seinfeld, but nobody's going to care about those because they're not Seinfeld, right? They're not official.
Or like
like
Ed's version of Seinfeld is different from Brian's version of Seinfeld, right? And so we're all watching our own versions of shows, and we can, I don't know, have Nirvana make an album with the Beatles or something, and listen to that.
You'll be able to, but you'll be more interested by what's the official sanctioned version of it. That'll always be the most interesting. So I think where you get into the synthetic content, where the synthetic content has validity or value, is where it's been officially sanctioned. So for example, in the PodcastAI context, podcasters that flip that switch and allow those experiences, okay, that's an official experience, right? So that's interesting to people. Something that's sort of, non-authorized, okay, it is interesting, but it's not going to be that interesting because there's going to be so much of it.
Joe Rogan did not review the synthetic version of the Joe Rogan podcast before it was released. It's not officially sanctioned. Yeah, I love that.
Exactly. So that's it's kind of like I could come up with a Napoleon quote, but if my Napoleon quote sounds impossible, like nobody cares. Like the real question is, okay, did Napoleon really say that? If not, I don't care what that quote says.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, this is great.
That's just how things are going to be.
Why don't we wrap up with a quick rapid fire? What's one app you can't live without?
Right now, I would say Twitter or maybe ChatGPT, actually. Like, it's frankly super time saving.
Yeah. For me, it's LinkedIn. I run everything through LinkedIn. What book has influenced your thinking the most?
Probably Atlas Shrugged was a big one. Kind of interesting.
I need to go reread that. I don't think I've read it since high school.
Yeah, it's a fun read the first few times. The Fountainhead too, pretty cool.
Yeah. If you could automate one aspect of your daily life, what would it be?
Scheduling, which I have kind of automated with Calendly.
There was that one that competed with Calendly like, I don't know, 8 years ago. Was it X something? X.AI?
Not sure, but
it had a chatbot that would do the scheduling and it would just email back and forth, and I don't know what happened to them. Calendly kind of became the de facto standard. But that is a lot of back and forth. I just tell people like Calendly, just use my Calendly,
I used to be a little skeptical of Calendly. Like I thought it was kind of rude to just shove a link at someone. And Sean, my co-founder, he was just like, no, it's just easier. I'm like, it's kind of weird. And
it's a little standoffish. It's kind of like, here, use this. I'm important. But I totally get that. But I
got one over. It's like, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer. It's like, hey, looking forward to syncing up. Here's my calendar. But it almost becomes like a race. Who can send the link first now?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I got you. Like, use mine.
It really is.
Or like, hey, I used yours. I can't find any time to use mine. That happens a lot too.
Yeah.
Especially when other people in Asia or Europe or something, I'm like, I can't find any time to use mine. What's a hobby or activity you do to unwind?
Used to be video games.
What's your top 3 video game?
Like historical. So there's this company called Paradox Interactive. They're a Swedish company. They do, Victoria 3, Europa Universalis, Hearts of Iron.
Okay.
Like all of these historical, like you're controlling countries on the world map. Those are always fun.
Like 4X, like Civilization kind of games.
Basically, it's like Civilization, but like realistic.
More historically accurate. Yeah.
Exactly.
I love those. Yeah. I love games like that.
Those are always fun. And then recently there was this new game, Baldur's Gate 3. I downloaded it. I bought it. I downloaded it. I launched the starter, like the launcher.
Yeah.
And then I was about to click launch, and I was like, what am I doing? I do not have time to even try to play this.
No.
So I just closed it.
Not when you're a founder. I mean, when you're a VC, sure. Like I play an hour or two every night. Like I play Escape from Tarkov every night with an old friend of mine. And I've been playing Helldivers too recently.
Yeah, so it's like as a founder, you do not have the time for that.
Time, yeah.
I would say
even me, I don't really have time, but I just do it anyway because like I know I'll burn myself out otherwise.
Yeah, I would say I kind of play myself by if I want to procrastinate, I procrastinate by doing something else I should be doing as well.
Yeah.
So I'm like procrastinating between things I have to actually do. So that's a pretty interesting technique.
It's fun to create things though, to be really deep on a project. Like that is your video game, right? So that's really awesome. If you could have dinner with any tech pioneer, dead or alive, who would it be? And why?
Oof. Steve Jobs.
Everyone says Steve Jobs. Yeah.
Simple one.
Be.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's got to be him. Elon Musk would be a second place for me, I think. He's still alive though. So.
And look, that really is the order, right?
Yeah, it's kind of those two, right? Yeah. And both had the same biographer write a really amazing book about them. So how can people find podcast.ai, Ed?
Well, they should not go to podcast.ai. That is not us. They should go to podcast. That's a bit of a problem.
Yeah. Oh, that is a problem. Who has podcast.ai?
Actually, Play HT, which is a competitor to 11 Labs.
Okay. Well, podcastai.com is where you want to go to find this beautiful, amazing platform and start using it.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
A pleasure.